Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building. He's back.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, he's still running for president 2020, correct?
I am.
All right,
I
he's still
am.
running.
It's good to be back.
Julián Castro, welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
The reason I said still running because last week
Beto O'Rourke was here. He came here on a Thursday. Grand opening, grand closing that Friday.
Yeah.
And now we look, you're polling around 1% nationally. You had to lay off staff in South Carolina and New Hampshire. So is this a last stand of sorts?
No, we met the goal that we had for fundraising in October and to make sure that we could push through. And so, I'm focused on getting to Iowa and also trying to get on these debate stages. We're going to have a debate in November and then one in December. So that's what we're focused on right now. But absolutely, I think anybody who's been following this race knows that I've had a unique voice in this campaign. We've run this campaign differently from the other campaigns. I haven't been afraid to speak up for people that often aren't spoken up for and to fight for people that need a fighter. And I'm going to keep doing that.
You haven't qualified for the November or December debate yet, though.
I have not. Yeah, I have not. In fact, one of the reasons that we went on this strong fundraising push in October was so that we could try and marshal resources to get the polling up, especially in these early states. We just launched an ad in Iowa that started at the beginning of the week. We have organizing teams now in Iowa and Nevada, and we're focusing on those two of the first four early states. And, of course, nationally trying to get our polling up.
How hard is it to get money, to raise money, to get people to support you and put money down to actually so you can buy spots and buy ads and continue on your mission?
Well, I mean, in some ways it's easier than it used to be because, the internet has democratized fundraising, especially in these presidential races. Like, one of the things I'm most proud of is that in this campaign, even though I'm nowhere near the top in terms of the amount of money that I've raised, I'm in the first, I think, top three people in terms of the percentage of small dollar donors. I think last quarter our average contribution was $18. So it's a lot of people giving, $15, $20, $25, $50, whatever they have, and that's what's powered this campaign. On the other hand, I've said I'm not taking any federal lobbyist money. I'm not taking any money from big oil and gas executives. I'm not taking PAC money. So that part, traditional contributions, that part, of course, has been harder because we've said we're going to stay away from those contributions.
But I was going to say that because the people that you're running against are taking some of those dollars and they have large sums of money that they can put into advertising and those other things. So how could you possibly win when they have those big backings? And no disrespect, but it's $18 ain't going to help when somebody's giving $1 million.
Well, what you need are millions and millions of people giving their $18.
Right.
Yeah, right?
Now, he made it seem like you just got an $18 campaign. You're just out here with $18 trying to figure it out.
A lot more than that. No, but, I'll take my $18 with integrity more than, $2,800 with no integrity any day of the week.
Right.
But no, we're powering a campaign that is based on people. And there's no question that, I don't have the resources in the campaign that some of the other campaigns do. And that's not to say, there are also some of those candidates, you think about Bernie. I mean, he's living by these same challenges, right? And so is Senator Warren. And so I'm not the only one who's doing that in this race, but I am proud that we have one of the highest percentage of small dollar contributions. And my voice, I think, has been different from everybody else's, whether we're talking about taking on police brutality or not being afraid to put forward my own immigration plan, talking about the poor and not only the middle class, because a lot of politicians for the last 40 years have focused solely on the middle class, and somewhere along the way, even as Democrats, we forgot to talk about the poor. I'm talking about both. I hope that as people have followed this campaign, they've seen that I've been different.
Well, I think that's because you're Latino. And, when you're Latino, you tapped in, like this is me being black, you're tapped into things that 370-year-old white people just can't be tapped into.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've put forward has been based on how I grew up, my experience growing up in segregated schools, segregated neighborhoods, understanding the challenges, the obstacles a lot of people face. And I think this is the important part. I think there are a lot of people that have had that experience out there, but not being afraid to lay it on the line, to put it on the table. A lot of times in politics, we start to get, very, very cautious and conservative and don't want to offend. We want to offend the least amount of people in order to win. And when I started this campaign, I said, look, we're just going to tell the truth. and we're not going to be afraid to take on these sacred cows. And I think that I've done that throughout this campaign.
How do you connect with the people? How do you change these polls around where you feel like people will be more in support of you?
Just, we're using every opportunity through media. Obviously, I've been on every debate stage so far, and so we've had the opportunity in debates. And I have seen the campaign get stronger and stronger. Like, I was starting from scratch back in January. I hadn't run for president before, even though I have executive experience, having served in President Obama's cabinet and been a big city mayor. I had not run for governor or senator before, so building our email list to be able to fundraise, getting the name ID up, all of that we've been playing catch up. But, slowly but surely, more people have found this campaign. And what's fascinating is that more and more young people have found this campaign. Mm-hmm. And when they do, we have like this cult following of a lot of young people, more and more of them that are really into it, But it does take the resources to get out there and make that broad enough so that you can make a real dent in a 16-person race. At one time we had 25 people. Now we still have 16. That's a challenge.
Why do you think a party as diverse as the Democratic Party has 3 70-year-old white people as the front runners?
Because I think that a lot of folks out there are scared about the prospect of Trump winning again in 2020, and what they're doing is that they're equating that with that a certain profile of candidate is the safe choice.
Yeah, electability.
That's right. But, when Barack Obama, when he was running, he wasn't the safe choice. Right. He was going around telling people that if we want to win this election, then we can't go in operate in fear of losing, right? That sometimes what you think is the safe choice is not the safe choice. And I said the other day, one of the big reasons that we lost in 2016 was because in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, people of color sat on the sidelines, right? The African-American turnout fell from 66% to 59.5%. Latino turnout fell from just over 48% to 47%. So you're going to need somebody as your nominee that can go and speak to those communities and electrify that coalition the way that Barack Obama was able to. Now, I don't think that anybody's going to do it quite like him.
He was an outlier, though.
Yeah, he was a unique talent, and I wouldn't put myself in the same category. I'm sure others would say the same thing. But I do think that there are some of us that can go and excite that coalition and get people off the sidelines into the voting booths, and that's the way that we're going to beat Trump.
You think President Obama set the bar too high?
No, I think he did what anybody should do, whether you're talking about, in any profession, which is that he set a very high bar for integrity, for vision, for inspiring people. That's what we want. We want people to set the bar high. I have no doubt that because he set the bar very high, this field is better than it otherwise would be. He's just helped everybody reach higher than we would be able to otherwise.
For people that haven't made a decision yet of who they like, what would you advise them to do, advise them to look at? And the reason I ask is everybody now seems like they're car salespeople. They're going to tell you the best thing that the car has to offer. Mm-hmm. They're going to tell you about affordable housing. They're going to tell you about health care. They're going to tell you about police brutality. But what should people be looking at in your eyes?
Well, I think that they're looking for 3 things, right? And with me, they should look at, number one, you got to look at somebody's experience and their track record. And when you start looking at my track record as mayor and as housing secretary, I'm not just talking about tackling criminal justice reform. We did that when I was at HUD. I'm not just talking about improving educational opportunity. We did that when I was mayor of San Antonio. We took on moving away from fossil fuels and embracing renewable energy when I was mayor, and a whole bunch of other things. Look at our record, because people can say anything, but there's some of us that have a track record, and I'm one of the few people in this race that has actually been in charge of something, right? I managed a department with a $48 billion budget, thousands of employees, offices around the country. I was mayor of the 7th largest city with about 1.4 million people. So there's a track record. The other thing is they should look at everybody's vision. And I've laid it out, what I believe we need to do in America so that everybody counts and everybody can prosper. And then they need to look at who can beat Donald Trump, right? And I believe that I offer 2 paths to the nomination. going back and getting Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania that we lost collectively by less than 80,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
And then going and getting Florida, getting Arizona, which is going to be very competitive, and even my home state of Texas, which is also becoming very competitive.
There are some people who believe that your campaign hasn't been covered fairly as other candidates because they have less experience. Like you just said, you were the mayor, you would have had a HUD. Like, why do you think that's the case? Why don't they follow you the way they follow some others?
I'm sure there are different reasons for that, but I think one of the reasons is that a lot of attention is focused on D.C. If you're in power in D.C., if you're currently in office and you're in power in D.C., there's a lot of attention that gets focused around D.C. because the press corps, like, they're all there. They're aggregated there. I also think that it would help if these newsrooms would diversify their ranks, because right now, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Last time on the debate stage in Ohio, I had the most tweeted out moment of the night when I said that police violence is also gun violence. That was the most tweeted about, sentence of the night. But when they went to the pundits on CNN, MSNBC afterward, they have a little bit of diversity, but mostly they didn't tackle that. They talked about other stuff, even though that had clearly resonated with a lot of people in this country because they've had the experience of having to deal with those issues. So that's just one example that I think that there needs to be a lot more diversity in not only political coverage, but media in general, and that would help.
Yeah, I remember when you said that on the debate stage. I didn't understand why you said that in that moment. It was a great statement, but that wasn't really what y'all were discussing at that moment, was it?
Oh, it was, for sure. Because I was linking it to the policy issue of mandatory gun buybacks with that would be any kind of door-to-door approach. And what I said was that, as you know, Tatiana Jefferson had just been killed in Fort Worth by a police officer who responded to her home at 2 a.m. and didn't identify himself, and then shot her and killed her through her window within 4 seconds of coming up on her. And my point was that, in the neighborhoods I grew up in, and I think in a lot of neighborhoods, that we're not looking for another reason for police to come beating on your door, and including if you had mandatory buybacks with, a door-to-door approach to go get those guns. That's why I made the connection to, police violence being gun violence as well. That was the policy connection.
Yeah, because I was trying to figure out, is he saying that should police have their guns taken away from them?
No, I wasn't saying that. No, I was saying that
because police need guns, right?
You're going to have police that are armed, although you do have other countries where that's not the case. But here in the United States, yes, as long as you're going to have people out there that are going to have those weapons, but that moment resonated with a lot of people because I think they believe that we do need to do better when it comes to excessive force that is used by police. And too often times, especially young black men and women that end up the victims of that. And, we've had great coverage in publications like The Root and a number of others, but that hasn't always been a part of the mainstream conversation.
How does Texas feel, being that you were mayor of San Antonio? How do they feel about your stance on guns?
I think, that even in Texas, people have moved over on this issue. They recognize, look what happened in El Paso. They recognize that we have to do something in terms of common sense gun safety. But
not take people's guns away from them, though.
Yeah, I don't think that people agree with a mandatory buyback program. I think that a voluntary buyback program has more support. I do believe that support over there has increased for banning certain types of assault weapons. Look at, a great example of this was Andrew Gilliam. Look at Andrew when he ran in Florida. He took on the NRA and he unabashedly ran on common sense gun safety legislation. And it's been forever since a Democrat has won the governor's race in a midterm year. But Andrew came within 31,000 votes of winning.
And they cheated. So if they hadn't cheated.
Yeah, they've dumped people off the rolls. Yeah, but that just shows you that even in a place that sometimes is referred to as the gunshine state, off of its nickname, the Sunshine State, Texas is like that too. You have a lot of people that of course like to go hunting and they like their guns, but more and more people also recognize that we can have a Second Amendment and also be sensible about it.
Now, what do you think about Trump's impeachment?
I'm happy that they're moving forward with it. I think this testimony that they're getting from folks who were working in the Ukraine in his own administration is damning, absolutely damning. I mean, now they have on the record from people who would know, who were part of the conversations, that there was directly a quid pro quo of, I'm not going to give you this military aid unless you announce an investigation against this company that my political opponent's son is on the board of. I mean, this guy is violating his oath of office. He's abusing his power. This is the kind of thing that we all read about that's happening in some, local office, some city council member or a school board member. And, in a heartbeat, a lot of these folks that have defended Trump would be calling those people corrupt, and he's corrupt too. I mean, this guy is a totally corrupt politician. And I say to Republicans all the time, look, if you want to be Republican and you're conservative and you have this ideology, this view, go ahead. I have no problem with that. I disagree with it, but I respect it. But find one that is actually honest. Find one that's not going to break the law, is not going to abuse his power. And I think, the best thing that could happen to the Republican Party in 2020 would be for them to get a different nominee.
Why isn't this more of a big deal? I don't feel like it's a big deal like it should be. Like, you see it on the news. Sometimes you see it on the front page of the newspaper. Why isn't this a big deal that there's so much corruption going on in our government, that our president is indeed a criminal? Like what you just said about, them realizing that he really was trying to withhold aid. Like, why isn't that more of a big deal?
Because he has normalized a lot of this stuff over the years. It really is a testament to how low the expectations are for this president, of people almost accept that he's dishonest and that he's lying. But we have to remember that that's not acceptable for the office of the president or any office of public service.
It's like people don't care.
Well, they're so beaten. People are so tired of it. That's actually why I believe that, there's a lot of work that has to go on between now and then. But I believe that 2020 is going to be a tsunami year, not just a wave year, but a tsunami year against Trump and the Republicans.
I think that Democrats have just started to act like what Trump is doing is actually a problem. I think that they were part of the problem of people normalizing it.
Of not calling it out.
Yeah, they weren't calling it out. They weren't like ringing the alarm. Like they was trying to be, so politically correct and worried about those hypothetical 2 to 3% of swing voters that voted for Obama but then voted for Trump. Like they weren't acting like he was a criminal.
No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I was the first one after the Mueller report came out. I think it was later that day, when those 10 instances of obstruction of justice were listed in that report, to say that he should be impeached. So from the very beginning of this thing, I've said he should be impeached, and I'm glad that they're pursuing it now. You're right. If the shoe were on the other foot and this were Barack Obama, as many people have said, I mean, they would have already gone through impeachment proceedings. They would be well on their way to trying to remove him from office. They never gave him the respect or the due that he was owed, and much less if
Why
he
is
had...
that?
For different reasons.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think some of them were just motivated by partisanship. Some of it is because he was the first black president. Some of it, they saw just their own political advantage to it. I think different reasons.
You could have led with because he's black.
Because he's black.
Well, no, I mean, that was a big part of it, right? Yeah, that was a big part of it. But he set the standard for integrity and, operating an administration the way that you should. And it is pathetic to look at these folks like Lindsey Graham and others now who are defending Trump when they created out of nothing scandals during the Obama administration that were not scandals.
Yeah.
And, it's so shameless. It really is something to watch.
I wonder why, though. Like, why do you have certain Republicans that would risk their reputations and their credibility for Donald Trump?
Because I do think that there's still a base that supports him, and they're afraid of being primaried. That's why, although I haven't heard it discussed that much, if there's a time that Trump needs to worry about, it's actually the time between the primaries and the general election, because there are several senators that are up for election in states that could go either way. Cory Gardner, Senator Collins out of Maine, even Mitch McConnell after what happened the other day in Kentucky, John Cornyn in Texas that is going to have a tough race, and a number of others. They're defending a lot of seats. So they have to buddy up to him to cover themselves for their primary. But right after their primary, like all politicians do, they're going to start worrying about the real deal for the general election. And what they're going to recognize by that time, especially after these public hearings and all of the evidence is out there for the public to see in black and white, to digest with their own eyes and ears, they're going to start getting worried. And if there's any danger for him of getting dumped by these Republicans, it would be in the summer of 2020, after the primaries are done, but when they're getting ready for their general and they need to show some independence from him. If you remember in 1974, when Nixon was dumped, he was dumped on August 9th, 1974, which was in that summer before the general election, but after the primaries. And so I see a weakness for him there.
How concerned should we be about Russian interference in the 2020 election?
Very concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going on right now. Facebook just announced a couple of weeks ago that they had found a whole bunch of accounts that were linked to Russia, still trying to influence our politics, dumping on some of the candidates in this race. God only knows what else they're doing in terms of getting information like they did in 2016. But we need to be very worried. That's why we should support legislation and fund improving our election systems, making it more secure, also setting a national standard for election systems. I mean, our elections right now are run by these counties. These counties, some of them have equipment that's 20 years old. Some of them have new equipment. Some of them have enough people staffing elections. Some of them are very understaffed. They don't have a uniform cybersecurity standard. We need to get our act together, knowing that we have this adversary out there that's trying to undermine our elections.
Don't you think it's kind of disingenuous to just tell people to go out there and vote in 2020 without letting them know that, hey, our elections have been compromised? Letting them know Mitch McConnell has blocked election security bills? Like, shouldn't we let people know?
Yeah, no, I believe, we should. And we should let them know. We should let them know, though, in a way that empowers them, right? Because, as you know, I mean, you have enough folks out there, and I grew up, at times feeling this, and definitely being around family members and around friends that felt this way. A lot of people just think that it's all like, you got to make a difference.
Their vote doesn't count.
Yeah, they think that their vote doesn't count in the first place. So, yes, you got to put it in context, but we also have to empower them to let them know that, hey, despite that, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that it's secure, but your vote does count, and you need to get out there.
Now, how do you go about doing that? Because we talk about blacks and Latino votes last time, that people didn't come out. People didn't come out to the polls. They felt like they didn't care. So how do you make people feel like that their vote does matter, that their vote does care, that they will come out and vote this year?
I mean, it starts with having a nominee that can actually speak to those issues and has a track record on it. I've clearly done that in this campaign and during my time in public service. Also, on top of that, we have to spend time in our communities out there. It's not enough to just go hit people up 3 months before an election and think that they're going to suddenly say, oh, okay, well, you're here 3 months before the election, I'm going to go support you. Some of the things that I'm most proud of are these community groups that are doing the work of going and knocking on doors and listening to people about what they want. I visited with a group in Milwaukee that was doing this, and not pushing a candidate, not pushing a party, talking to them about, hey, what about what's happening in your neighborhood? What's going on in your block? Do you need better streets, or, do you need better sidewalks? How's your relationship with the police? Tell us about that. Like things that actually are relevant to their everyday lives. Mm-hmm. That's the way that we're going to build more people who are active in our democracy because they care and they feel like there's a connection there. And, I got that from growing up with a Chicana activist mom, and also from coming up in local politics where there was no way that you were going to succeed unless you went door to door, knocking on people's doors, understanding what they want from their government. We need to inject our politics with more of that, so that it's not so distant. It's not just what's happening in D.C., but it's, okay, what's happening in your neighborhood, in your life, and how can we make it better?
What do you think Democrats, particularly white Democratic candidates, get wrong about Latino voters?
Well, I mean, I'll begin that by saying I think that we have a lot of Democrats, including white Democrats, that are doing their best to reach out to the Latino community. But I think that there are misperceptions about the Latino community out there generally. One of the misperceptions that is people think that everybody just got here 5 minutes ago. When they think Latino, they think, that just got here 5 minutes ago. I mean, here in New York, you have a huge Puerto Rican community of citizens, and whether they're in the island or they're in Florida or they're here in New York, they've been part of, the story of this nation. My grandmother that I grew up with came from Mexico, but she got here in 1922, almost 100 years ago. And you have a lot of people, wherever they're from, that have been here for a long time. The other thing that people don't get, I think, and I would say many of us don't think of in the first place, is that one of the fastest growing demographic is biracial people, right? That people are growing up in households that are mixed today. And we're still talking in our politics about as though there's only whites and only blacks and only Latinos and only Asian Americans. And I've been as guilty of this as anybody else. But one of the things I constantly try and remind myself is that actually, as we would hope, people are making friendships and, marrying each other and starting families in every other way that you can in a positive way. And that I think is redefining or will redefine how we think of our relationships in the years to come.
You talk about Latinos in New York. One of the debates that we've been having, especially in hip hop, is Latinos and the use of the N-word. Should Latinos be allowed to use the N-word?
No, I don't think that that people should. I have never done that. I don't think that people should do that. I have always said that I can't put myself into that experience, and that there's a distinction there. And so, I wouldn't advise that.
Not even as a term of endearment?
I wouldn't do that, no.
What do you feel about a lot of these, especially minorities, that are backing or supporting Biden and backing Warren and Sanders, and you look at somebody like yourself and they be like, you don't get that same support as them? But that has to bother you.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, like you probably have 16 type A personalities that are running for the most powerful office in the world. And so, of course,
But you see somebody that looks like you and then they're on Biden's side, you'd be like, bro, I'm one of you.
Well, but it's also, look, I also don't believe that people should vote for me, Latinos should vote for me just because I'm Latino. And I don't take their vote for granted. But I do think that that's a story about the advantages of, having been in it, of having strong name ID and having resources, right? I mean, to give Vice President Biden credit and also Bernie and Elizabeth, they're household names. They've been at it and they have built that up. Nobody can take that away from him. So it's up to those of us who are running to present our own case, to make our case. And I think as more people learn about my campaign and about my leadership, that we're able to get more support. But as I said, like, we've been catching up trying to do that, and I think that by the time we get to Iowa in February, that I'm going to have stronger support in those communities.
Last week, Mayor Pete said the race is now a two-person race between him and Elizabeth Warren. And your response to that was, anyone who thinks this is a two-person race doesn't know shit about the Black and Latino communities.
I don't think I quite said it like that.
Yeah. But what did you mean by that?
What I meant is that to say it's a two-person race, I have a lot of respect for Mayor Buttigieg. He and I have had a chance to chat just briefly on the campaign trail. Obviously, he's amazing in many of the things that he's done. But he's also polling at 0 or right near 0% with black voters. There was a poll that came out yesterday by The Economist, and I was at 3%, but I had 5% support among black voters and 7% support among Latino voters. And my point was that if you're talking like that, then you obviously, you don't know about black and Latino voters and how important their vote is to anyone who is going to hope to become president of this country. And I said that, Trump won in part because his playbook was that enough people would sit out in Milwaukee and Philadelphia and Detroit. And we're going to need to go back to Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and to energize that base. And if you can't energize that base, then it's too risky for Democrats to put you at the top of the ticket. And I've further said that, that there's a track record there with Mayor Buttigieg and African-American voters in South Bend that has been written about. He acknowledged on the debate stage that he had failed when they asked him about that relationship. And so I'm not saying anything new.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making a critique that he hasn't made of himself. And I just think that that's a tremendous liability in a general election, and there's no way that we should risk that kind of nominee.
What's your relationship like with black voters in San Antonio?
It's been strong.
'Cause when you call somebody out,
it's been very strong.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of the reasons that I was appointed as housing secretary for President Obama was that I focused immediately when I became mayor on the east side of San Antonio, which traditionally has been where many of the African Americans in San Antonio live. That's about 6 to 7% of San Antonio's population.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, I recognized, having grown up there, that part of town had been neglected, that it had been underserved. And I said that I want to be different and I want to actually focus on doing something. And so we started with East Side Reinvestment Summits. We pursued and got a choice grant from the Obama administration, a Promise Neighborhood grant, a Department of Education grant for the benefit of the people who are living there. And so I focused a lot of energy and time on trying to uplift the East Side and the African American community. Because of that, I have a lot of local support among African Americans that are in San Antonio that I worked with. There was a fundraiser that was from the African American community around Juneteenth back in San Antonio of this year, June of this year. So yeah, I mean, people can go look at the track record. I believe that it's a strong track record, that the evidence is there, and that that's different from the track record that Mayor Buttigieg has in South Bend. Question,
is President Obama's record fair game for Democrats? And do you take it personal, being that you was a part of that administration?
No, I don't take it personally. I of course, the record of any president is going to be critiqued. It's going to be, analyzed. I've said that it was an honor to work for the Obama administration. I don't agree with the people that have tried to say that somehow President Obama, was not a great president or fell short. I mean, he was a great president. I'm convinced that history is going to see him as one of the best presidents we've had. I also believe, though, and I've pointed this out, that there are ways that we can build on his legacy. Right? When I talk about housing, or we've talked about climate change or immigration, I've also pointed out, okay, the next time you have a Democrat as president, what else can we do? What more can we do? So we need to talk about both of those things.
Because even when you attacked, I don't want to say attacked, but when you came at Joe Biden and they called it an attack, they act like that was not right of you to do. And I'm like, why does Joe Biden get that kind of leeway? Because he was cool with Obama?
I know. Well, what I said, and also I think Corey had pointed this out in the debate before, was that, look, I mean, both Vice President Biden and I served in the Obama administration, and both of us have a lot of affection and, of course, support President Obama and his legacy. But I was saying that, what Vice President Biden was doing, and this is what Corey said also, it's interesting because, on the debate stage, anytime he wanted to point out something great from the Obama administration, and there are a lot of great things, he would say, basically like he's right there taking credit for that, almost taking credit for Barack Obama's work. But when there's a critique on immigration or some healthcare, some other issue about the Obama administration, he would say, well, I wasn't president. Essentially, you're throwing it back on President Obama when you don't like it, but taking full credit when you do. And, I pointed that out. Cory Booker pointed that out. I don't see that as an attack on President Obama. I see that as a critique of a fellow candidate in this race, in his campaign, Vice President Biden. I have a lot of respect for Vice President Biden. We worked together in that administration. But we're also running for president, and people should know the distinctions among us.
It's good to have respect for Biden, right? But you got to look at him sometimes and say to yourself, why is he one of the front runners? He's really not good at running for president.
Well, I mean, I think that
he's blowing a 3-1 lead. Like if this was the NBA Finals, he was up 3-1 and he's blowing that 3-1 lead right now.
But that's not unusual, right? I mean, actually, if you look at who starts off as the front runner versus who ends up as the nominee, more times than not, the people that start off look at Obama. He didn't start off at the beginning of 2008. It was actually Hillary Clinton, right, that everybody thought was going to win. And so that's not uncommon. And what you're seeing right now in this race, and one of the reasons that I made a commitment, like, no, man, I'm going to stay in this thing and keep fighting, keep scratching, try and get my support to build out there, is because I see that things can change in this race, that it's more fluid than it ever has been.
Doesn't it seem like Biden has early signs of dementia, though?
I haven't seen that. I wouldn't say that.
Very forgetful.
No, when we were on the debate stage, some of the mainstream media made out this moment between him and me as though I was suggesting that. But that was just a reaction in the moment. That wasn't my intention. It was that he had said that, people could buy into or would have to buy into his health insurance plan. And then right after that, he denied saying the words buy-in. And my quick reaction was, wait, did you forget that you said that? I was not suggesting something bigger.
Come on.
I was not.
Clearly, it concerns you a little. It has to concern you a little bit, because I've had conversations with just regular, everyday people, and they say that's a concern of theirs, that he seems like he has early signs of dementia.
I've seen him up close. I would not say that.
Okay.
But I would say that he and I have a disagreement over what we're going to do on health care. And what I was pointing out is that his plan would leave 10 million people uninsured, and that my plan would actually cover everybody. The point I was making, and this goes to your early question too, is that I believe that, Barack Obama broke through and was able to get health care done in a way that 7 presidents before him had tried to do and they had failed. He succeeded. But I also think that his vision for the future was, hey, ultimately we're going to get every single person to have health care. And that my approach would actually do that, whereas Vice President Biden's, it would leave 10 million people out. And if we're going to go through the battle again of actually trying to get health care, revamped, then we need to make sure this time that every single person has it.
So basically Biden's forgetting about 10 million people.
He's leaving 10 million people out.
Oh.
Now, have you reached out to Obama, or has he reached out to you and given you any advice at all?
He gave me great advice. He said, be yourself. And that in such a crowded field, you don't know what's going to happen. And that when he started, he said he didn't exactly know how it was going to go. But he said, especially now, people want to know who you are. And go out and show them who you are. And if you do a good job with that, that things will take care of itself.
He has to endorse one person. Who's he going to endorse? You?
I hope so. I'll take his endorsement right now.
Do you believe
no,
Joe?
I imagine that he's probably going to stay out of it until the primary is over. And I don't think that he's the only one that's going to do that. I mean, I would expect that Secretary Clinton and President Clinton, obviously I'm in no way speaking for them, but I would imagine that they're all probably going to stay out until after the primary is over.
Do you believe Joe when he said that Barack, he told Barack not to endorse him?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, no, if I can imagine that conversation.
Really? If somebody says, I want to endorse you, be like, no, don't endorse me.
That's not the first time I've heard that in politics.
Really?
Yeah, I remember hearing that before. Yeah.
Julián Castro has to go now.
Yeah, I know.
Well, we appreciate you for joining us.
And listen, if you drop out tomorrow, okay.
Text us first.
Right, then you're really.
If I drop out tomorrow, I'm going to say y'all were the bad luck charm.
That's fine. It's looking that way.
Oh my goodness.
It's starting to look that way.
No. We're going to keep fighting.
Yeah.
It's the
That's what
Breakfast
Beto
Club.
said too, by the way.
Yeah, he did say that.
Literally the day before he dropped out.
No, I'll be in here the day after tomorrow. Don't worry.
Got you.
It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.